You're tuned in to the MtG Cable cast, where they cover Magic, the Gathering finance. All right? You don't know about it? You're tuned in right now and get ready to learn some shit. Buckle your seatbelts and light a blunt and get ready for the MtG Cable cast. Starring Reptar and Thirsty, them onion head motherfuckers.
Alrighty, guys. Welcome to the newest episode of the Cabalcast, and this week we are doing our Bloomburrow set hype review. Now, last set hype review we did was MH3, and we changed things up. We are going back to our Goldilocks style set reviews for non-supplemental sets. So, we're bringing the classic too high, too low, just right. And with that, take it away.
So for me, Overhyped basically started, I think, week 1 of reviews. And this card basically burned forever long on my timeline. The infamous Cruel Claw. It is a black and a red for a 3/3 legendary creature, Weasel Mercenary with Menace. So basically just a Rakdos commander.
Yeah.
Whenever the infamous Cruel Claw deals combat damage to a player, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card. You may cast that card by discarding the card rather than paying its mana cost. So the reason why I believe this was overhyped from the beginning was because people immediately wanted to just slam Emrakul off of this thing. They wanted to try Emrakul the Aeon's Torn, which means you can't do that in Commander, but you can cast the second Emrakul, the Promised End, and Mindslaver somebody. You can cast anything really big that's Rakdos or colorless off of this card. The setup is fairly minimal, but there's just a lot that goes into doing this. If you wanted to use an Eldrazi Titan, there's a lot of cards you can use to set this up that can move the card from, because it's a graveyard trigger, right? Yeah. So you can use Haunted Crossroads or Volrath Strongholds, effectively the same style effect, to pull the creature back to the top of your library. You can use Scheming Symmetry to choose somebody else. You both tutor a card to the top. You can use Vamp Tutor, not personal, that's the blue one. Whatever. There are a myriad of ways to do this in black to set up the top of your library after this thing connects. But at the end of the day, this is just a 3/3 with Menace, so it gets in early. But there's so much work that goes into setting up the top of your library that the amount of hype that this thing got to start was just overblown, I believe. I think that the mono white hideaway deck in Modern that has just as much hype as this has the opportunity to do more than this thing will in the long run in terms of casting game-ending spells. I really do not think that this kind of holds water long term. This is just something people glommed onto as the next coolest thing that you could be doing to cheat big creatures into play.
Yeah. The first thing I read about this card is this is the new Ragavan, which it is not.
It is not. It's
that is a very tall order.
Yeah.
To say that a standard card, I mean, granted, design is what design is, would be that good, but hey, who knows? Anecdotally, this is even bad in cube drafts. It's fine. It's just, I agree. This was like the next huge thing for like some sneak and show variants and for whatever cheat fatties into play in black red.
Yeah.
Like I'm just cheating other Rakdos in. Why wouldn't I just play Rakdos? I don't know. I don't know where this has a home outside of standard.
Yep.
It's not fast enough for any other format. No. So it was just always kind of overhyped for me because I don't know. It's standard.
I think for a lot of people, it exists in the same space as Kalia. And so they wanted this to be another Kalia, but more palatable because you don't have a trigger for the combat step. You have it after the combat step. Mm-hmm. And because you're not playing a Mardu commander, it's just Rakdos, the trigger is a bit more wide open into what you can be putting in off the top. Yeah. But it feels worse to try and set up your library like that and be that, like, have that much manipulation in Rakdos for the top of your library and be fairly vulnerable to do it in general. For you?
Yes. So my notes read raised foil furries.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is the alternate arts. I've kind of changed the way that I've looked at things financially, now that we've proven the cycle we're in for releases and everything else is the cycle we're in. The one that I'm using as an example is actually the one that I think could actually go up the most, and that's Balin the Haymaker, even though I know I said these were overpriced. This is your classic Naya tokens, cast as Naya. He's a 4/3, legendary rabbit warrior, so one of those is relevant. Tap 2 untap tokens, add 1 mana of any color. Tap 3 untap tokens, draw a card. Tap 4 untap tokens, put 3 +1/+1 counters on this, and it gains trample until end of turn. That said, this is a non-serialized foil version of a card that's selling for like $250. And that's the most expensive card in the set. Now, we are getting so many of these high-end foil treatments, these high-end specialty variants, that unless there's something to me that's like incredibly iconic, the oil-slicked Praetors, for example, that's like in the history of Magic, that's iconic, that means something. Most of these like alternate treatments, I mean, look at the anime Omniscience at this point. Look at some of those anime treatment cards that were a ton of money when they first came out, and they've just tanked now. And that's what I expect to happen with these, and I think these are overpriced because they're going to be opened into the ground. Granted, we don't have serialized cards here, so the overall open on the set might actually be lower, but we're going to get a ton of these. This is too much money for something like this. I understand that the people that are running it in Commander are going to want the best version possible for their Commander.
For sure.
I don't think that's enough people for it to make a difference. But of all of these, and this is something I've learned, is like, hey, some of them do take off. I actually think Balin is the one that might the most because, one, it looks like Usagi Yojimbo, which is awesome. And two, it actually does something that is unique and flavorful for the card, as in tokens, because rabbits reproduce like crazy. And it's distinctly in the colors that it needs to be for that to be a thing.
Yeah.
So this is one that, like, yeah, I could see it. But overall, these guys are not good. It's cards that have 3 versions of them in this set that may or may not be playable in EDH. And they're all like $100 plus. And that's just too much, in my opinion. It should not be that high.
I agree. So I know this is purely anecdotal, but when we got, was it SNC, I believe? And we had the alt art treatments in that set, the anime, pseudo anime treatments.
Yeah.
I waited to get a Light Pause for the same reason. I thought I'd end up running Light Pause either instead of Zur in my deck or alongside Zur in the deck. And because I didn't need it at the moment, I just sat there and I waited not too long, a couple weeks, and eventually picked it up at a price that was fairly reasonable. Light Pause, great card, great utility. People thought it was going to be, the next greatest thing in Commander. It just made auras ridiculous. Everybody should be playing it, blah, blah, blah. Ended up falling flat. Balin, however, was a card I was actually looking at as well. I called it from my list before the episode. It didn't even make like my final notes with the other cards because I didn't know where to put it. It didn't. It caught no hype. But I was just looking at this as such a good card for Naya tokens, something we don't see that often, and it plays perfectly into what you want to be doing with Naya tokens. Like you said, it's not Perforos, but it can be played alongside Perforos. It still works well with Impact Tremors. You can still give all your creatures Vigilance and then tap them to this ability. There's a lot of cool and interesting things in here, and I think this is kind of like a regeneration for the Naya tokens theme overall, and maybe we will see the token decks move away from just purely Selesnya and extend into Naya and start pick it up. And this is a fantastic card to kind of do that on the surface. Paying $200 and some odd dollars for a copy of this card right now does seem a bit ridiculous. I agree.
Yeah, like to me, it's like $200 is a survival.
Yeah.
One of those is better.
Yeah, for sure. Or a Cradle to go with all the tokens. Moving into underhyped for me, we did this episode like 2 weeks late, so this card I think is now the most hyped card in the set, and when I was looking at it, it seemed like nobody cared. Innkeeper's Talent. I read this card, and I didn't even make it to level 3. I made it to level 2, and I just slammed it onto the list. So this is a class. They returned from Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. Innkeeper's Talent is the green rare class, and for 1 and a green, the level 1 says At the beginning of combat, on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Cool, you put a counter on a thing. Then you can pay a second green. So now we're at 1 and 2 green. Permanents you control with counters on them have ward 1. I stopped there. That's insane. For a colorless and 2 green, the squad gets ward.
Yeah.
Like, the homies get ward. Fantastic. I didn't even make it to level 3, and level 3 is why I think this card is currently the most hyped in the set. 3 and a green. If you would put 1 or more counters on a permanent or a player, put twice that many of each of those kinds of counters on that permanent or player instead. So I'm going to walk this one backwards. Right now, this is like the most hyped card in the set. I think it's $20. It might be single-handedly the most expensive card in the set. Why? Because it pseudo combos with the Vraska from the Dominaria set. Vraska, whatever complete, is like 3 Phyrexian black and a black for a Planeswalker that ETBs with an amount of loyalty. If you have Innkeeper's Talent at max level, so you've paid 4 colorless and 3 green to max this thing out, you double the amount of counters that are on that Vraska. You can then ultimate it immediately, and you put the ability says if a player doesn't have like 9 poison counters on them, put 9 poison counters on them. And then Innkeeper's talent just doubles that and kills them. So right there you have that combo. And then over the last couple of days, both Reddit and Saffron Olive have just been going nuts with the cook on this. And Saffron Olive has a bunch of videos about it. So like if we did this episode during pre-release season, I would have looked like a genius. But at this point in time, I'm just like weeks behind on this one.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think this is just a fantastic commander card. Like I said, at level 2, everything has ward 1. So if you pay a colorless and 2 green, then 2 colorless, a green and a white to activate your Gavany Township, cool. The squad has tokens and ward 1. That's fantastic. It works real good with Balin. Like, I think this stuff is just amazing, but nobody seemed to really care about this. In pre-release season, we're kind of just at this point now where people are realizing like, oh, the level 3 on this is actually something that just murks people. You cast up a Planeswalker. Saffron Olive, I think, is just running through them all, just seeing what he can do with them, and just basically one-shotting people from the game by casting a Planeswalker, because you know what happens when you have doubling season in play? People die. That's it. That's just how it works. We've seen this before. It wasn't great when doubling season was in standard. I think Planeswalkers were 2 sets away. They might have existed for a little bit, but it was like 4 mana for doubling season and then like 5 or 6 mana for a Planeswalker, and you were just dead. That's how that standard worked. Yeah. At least this time around, things are a little slower, so this might actually pick up in standard overall. It won't just be this kind of like goofy thing you can be doing. But overall, I think this card just has long-term viability in Commander. The price point right now is just a little unsavory, but we're like only a week away from release, so it's going to come down in time, especially if the heat on this card does die down from standard. Like once people are done experimenting with it and like people stop losing their minds, this comes back down overall. But at the end of the day, this is just something that during spoiler season people overlooked. And I want to stick on this for a moment as well and extend this. All the talents are actually pretty interesting. Innkeeper's talent was the one that caught my eye, and the red one was next in line. I don't remember what it does off the top of my head, but I do remember seeing it has like a $10 plus price tag. Here it is, Artisan's Talent for 1 in a red. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. So you rummage. It's the red effect. Then at level 2, for 2 in a red, non-creature spells you cast cost a colorless less, so it's an Electromancer effect. It's a mana value reducer. And then at level 3, for another 2 in a red, if a source you control would deal non-combat damage to an opponent or a permanent an opponent controls, it deals that much damage plus 2 instead. So it's a Tor brand as well. So it's effectively this kind of like little storm out with the triple blue, triple red Niv Mizzet. You can just ting people out all day long with that talent. I think they're all pretty good overall. They're all worth a look, but nobody seemed to give a heck about Innkeeper's talent during preview season.
Yeah. It's I saw it during preview season, and the third one was the most important one to me because, again, as you said, EDH. I did not expect it to see any play in standard that was like developed. I obviously expect that in spoiler season, but I don't think it sticks past that. I think this may end up being one of the fastest EDH cards to cycle into the price it's supposed to be. That's fair, that we've had in a while, because even Sheoldred wasn't an EDH card. But It'll be interesting to see for sure. I like cards like Talents. Virtual Card Advantage is dope.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
Here for it. My underpriced was one of the most vague things I could have possibly said, and that was Mythics under 3. And the reason I say that, and I'm going to use a couple of examples here. The main one is going to be Warren War Leader. So Warren War Leader, touching on the Naya Tokens theme, is 2 white for a 4/4 that has Offspring 2, which, for those of you that don't know, because there are 40 billion rules now, means make a 1/1 token copy of it for paying 2 colorless. And whenever you attack, you get to choose one. Either you make a rabbit token that's tapped and attacking, or attacking creatures you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. This is something that I could see this as an EDH card that maintains its value and goes up continuously for a while, especially now that we have a rabbit Naya token commander. This is a strategy that set design-wise they've been leaning into. There's an opportunity here. I know collector boosters change things, but there's cards like that exist as Mythics under $3 that are only going to get more affordable that are kind of plane specific. I don't think we've had rabbits more than one set in Dominaria, and don't count Jackalope Herd. That's a Jackalope.
Yeah, I think Regal. Let me check Regal Bunny Corn, but that's all I got.
Yeah, like there's not much, but there's a lot of cards in here in sets, especially with collector boosters, and that's one of the important things. Is not every Mythic gets a collector booster treatment. So paying attention to that, there's actually opportunities. So I've been kind of combing through stuff like this to make it work. You know, another bonus one for free is Eluge the Shoreless Sea. 1 and 3 blue, power and toughness equal to the number of islands. Whenever it enters or attacks, put a flood counter on a land. It's an island in addition to its other types. The first instant or sorcery spell you cast each turn costs 1 blue or colorless less for each land you control with a flood counter on it. Like, there are cards there that have the opportunity to be something special.
Yeah.
It's just looking for them. But I think those cards do exist in this set. Not something every set has, but I think there's some diamonds in the rough here to be found for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think Eluge is a really interesting case because it came out and people went nuts when they read Flood Counter and they thought they didn't finish reading the card.
Yeah.
And then they finished reading and they're like, oh, only my Flood Counters on my lands. Like, and then the hype just kind of died out from there as it seemed like people just attritioned away from this card. But it is not the most difficult thing to re-trigger this. It's not the most difficult thing to shift flood counters around, to proliferate and then do that. It takes a lot of work, just like the infamous Cruel Claw, like I mentioned before. But yeah, there's definitely some grist for the mill. There's definitely some opportunity here for low-hanging mythics. And it's also interesting to see, like, you mentioned some of these do have alternate treatments, some of them don't. Some of their alternate treatments cost just as much as the regular as well, like Warren War Leader. Their prices are cents apart. I didn't take a look at Eluge, but I assume they're also pretty close. And at that point in time, yeah, you can just go in on either one and feel fine about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Ready for Just Hyped?
Yes. What for you was Just Hyped?
For me, the Just Right hype around Dawnstruce spoke volumes, which is just cool, heroic intervention, again, but white, and slightly worse. So it doesn't need a lot of hype. It just is what it is. It is silently one of the most played cards, according to Rec, from the set already. It's already seeing, like, I don't want to call it its proper place, but it's already seeing an amount of play that you would expect for heroic intervention, but white. According to Rec, it didn't need to be talked about a lot. Everybody knows what this card does. The gift a card mechanic on this one is draw a card. It's not like gift a fish or the other one. There are 3 different types of gifts you can give. I can't remember what the third one is. So that's really the trade-off. Basically, the difference between Dawnstruce and heroic intervention is that you and permanents you control gain hexproof until end of turn, unless you gift the card, at which point permanents you control also gain indestructible until end of turn. Heroic Intervention does both for the same cost, a colorless and a pip. This is just a colorless and a white instead of a colorless and a green. So at the end of the day, I don't think we really need to spend a whole lot of time talking about this card. From a speculative standpoint, this does have an Altar treatment that looks fantastic, and I'll bring it up, which costs, about twice as much as the regular, and yeah, it should for what it looks like. But at the same time, that also means that the price point on these are probably correct for the short term. The midterm, it might be decent as well, and in the long term, they are most definitely going to go up, because gifted card is a mechanic that is basically plane specific, I think, at this point, because it's just animals giving gifts. It is part of, I think, the lore behind Red Dawn or whatever, right? Redguard that went into the set. So there is opportunity here for this card speculatively. It's just going to be in the future, buy in the future once we really start to crack into the set, i.e. in the next 3 weeks before we get Duskmourn. And then I would not really expect a reprint of this in a lot of supplementals because of the gifted card mechanic. So I think you're pretty safe here on both versions. There's my just right.
Yeah, that was immediately the thought I had when I looked at this was, oh, we have Heroic Intervention at home. And I actually think Gift is a neat mechanic, and I hope that they revisit it at some point, but it is plane specific. But that said, this is the kind of effect that you can't really have enough of in an EDH deck if you're in the colors.
Yeah.
So I think having, now we have Heroic Intervention number 2, which plays really well in Naya tokens. I'm going to hammer that one home. My just right, on the other hand, was the Otter. Raoul Crackling Wit. So this is one that, very similarly to you just got to read it and you understand what it is. It's 2 blue-red. Planeswalker starts with 4 loyalty. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a loyalty counter on it. +1 loyalty, create a 1/1 blue and red otter. It has prowess. -3, draw 3, then discard 2. Then, and this is where it gets interesting, his alt is -10. Draw 3 cards, you get an emblem with instant and sorcery spells you cast have Storm. I think right now $6 is right for this card. Storm's dead in Modern. This is not going to help it come back. It doesn't actually make it faster. Storm in Legacy doesn't want this card.
Too slow.
But I think this may be one of the best Spellslinger deck cards ever printed. And I think that right now, $6 to $8 is very good. I think in about a year, $6 to $8 is great.
Yeah.
So it's one that I think right now is about right. But I do see this as something else that potentially gains, because it does so much in the archetype that it clearly slots into and was intended for.
Yeah, I'm looking at this card, and my immediate thought isn't just Spellslinger. That one seems on the nose. I read the ultimate, and it's draw 3 cards. You get an emblem with the Is It mechanic. That's how I read this. And my immediate thought was, what is the playability of this card? What can we compare it to? And then it was a very quick hop, skip, and jump over to Tommy, a field researcher, whose ultimate is -7. Draw 3 cards. You get an emblem with Omniscience.
Yeah.
Because that's what the Bant mechanic is.
Yep.
And so this just seems... It also costs 4 and has 4 loyalty. +1, -2, -7. Stat lines are very similar here. And so I'm hoping, one, this is a trend, because I think this is kind of cool, where we get a draw or whatever.
Yep.
Do a thing 3 times, get an emblem with the colors keyword.
Yeah, the colors effect. Yeah. Which would be really cool.
Yeah, and Tomio, field researcher, granted it is Omniscience and not the Storm keyword, is in 20,000 decks. It is Bant, so it is a little more limiting than just Is It, a 2-color combination. But at the end of the day, you're not really playing Storm outside of Is It. It's difficult. You can play Grixis. It is traditionally the most popular color combination for Storm, because the black tutors are usually, the older you get in formats, the best, because they're unrestricted. And at that point, Ral just kind of...
Either that or the disruption.
Yeah, Ral just kind of fits in perfectly into the Is It Storm deck, especially the one I was mentioning before with Niv, the triple blue, triple green, or triple blue, triple red Niv Mizzet. And it is just, another tool in the kit, another option to go off. It draws cards, which is exactly what you want in that deck, because eventually you just need to hit a critical mass between hand and graveyard. They don't all need to be perfect. You just need a lot of them, especially when your emblem is Storm. Then we have things like Radstorm and a number of blue cards that just proliferate on their own, so you don't even have to wait to get Ral to ultimate. You might be able to get there like maybe
the next turn.
I was going to say, you could call it the hard way. Storm out to Ral alt, and now everything has Storm after that. It's kind of like a supplementary 1,000-year Storm. Like, there's a lot.
Yeah.
The longer I sit here and talk about it, the more I realize there's just, like, a lot more potential behind this card. And so at the end of the day, it does seem like it was, like, kind of rightly hyped, because you have to want a Daffy Duck in Commander. Like, just have the cigar blow up in your face. And that's what this card kind of leads to, because that's what that deck does. If you want to sculpt the perfect hand, you're either going to slow the game down, turn it into mud, and everybody's going to hate you, or you're just going to go for it when you think you can, take a 15-minute turn, have it blow up in your face, pass turn, die, and then twiddle your thumbs until the next game. So, like,
yeah,
I think that's it. I think Ral fits perfectly in there. There's the alt art version. I think they're both adorable. They're otters no matter how you slice it, so there's always going to be that kind of demand. It's weird to say and reference back to, like, Pokemon and anime shows where it's like, cool, I like this Pokemon, and you have the art for it. Like, I like otters, and Magic has an otter now, so I'm going to buy all the otters. Like, that's the thing, you know? So there's a weird amount of appeal for this card behind that, and I think for the amount of hype that we saw for this card overall, the things that it can do, where it will and won't play, I think that was just right for this. It's just kind of, when you set aside the art factor of it, I think the card plays just right.
Yeah. Anything else before picks?
Nope, but I'm going first.
All right.
Because I'm talking about a constructed card today. Oh, that's right. We talking about standard right now. That format's coming back. We're looking at Get Lost today. We are taking a look at an instant from the Lost Caverns of Ixalan that costs a colorless and a white. It says destroy target creature, enchantment, or planeswalker. Its controller creates 2 map tokens. And a map token says, 1 and a tap, sacrifice this artifact. Target creature you control explores. Activate only as a sorcery. And an explore is yet another keyword, and we just have a chain of keywords I don't feel like explaining. So we're just going to go right into this one. So when I was taking my notes this week, CK was buying 70 Get Lost at $3. They had none for sale at $6. As of this moment, they are buying 85 for $3.50. So stonks go up. There were 377 listings on TCG Player, LP or better, for a market of $3.57. There are now 366 listings with a market of $3.61, so we are seeing a little bit of movement on this card. Day of info, December 18th, 2023, CK had 253. Sorry, they were buying 253 at $3.70, so we saw a dip in price, and now we're coming back, which makes sense because this card basically fell out of standard. They had 0 and their price was $6.50. There were 227 listings on TCG Player with a market of $3.89. So basically what we saw is that when this card fell out of standard, when it fell out of kind of hype, it dropped in price. And now that it's back, guess what? So's the price. Now, playability. This is a versatile instant speed removal spell that is pretty clean overall. Most things considered in both Commander and Standard. Now, currently in Standard, this is in the 4/5 color control decks that survived the rotation. This is the deck that basically hard casts Atroxa now. It ramps into Atroxa. It doesn't cheat or reanimate Atroxa like it did a year and a half ago with the Dimir Siege. We are Atroxing the hard way. There's also the idea of Azorius, Boros, and Jeskai lists. Control aggro flavors of all of them that do play Get Lost in a post-rotation standard, but they kind of exist in low numbers, so I do consider those the outliers. If the control deck remains one of the most popular and/or best decks in Standard, I would expect downward pressure to remain constant and this card to continue selling fairly well. And at the end of the day, Get Lost does kill enchantments, so Innkeeper's Talent, not really long for this world. As we discussed with Winds of Abandon a few weeks back, this is a flexible removal spell that looks to be becoming a part of the white instant speed removal kit in Commander. It's not flashy, but it's flexible and it does get the job done. Now, it really isn't as clean as Swords or Path. It leaves 2 map tokens behind that give your opponents an advantage depending on board state. So the immediate comparison here is Generous Gift, and for 1 more colorless mana in Generous Gift, you can destroy any permanent and just leave behind a 3/3 elephant, where Get Lost leaves behind those 2 map tokens. There is a bit of an upside, like with the other removal spells, that you can tag your own permanent in response to something and leave yourself with the map tokens for later use. So as much as they might be a downside, in the face of a Wrath or opposing removal spell, you can use this to your advantage and kind of leave something around for later. As mana efficiency and flexibility start to kind of take root inside Commander as guiding tenets on how to build performant decks, spells like this that allow you to start double spelling as early as possible to maintain or establish board positions are becoming incredibly important. So when evaluating your targeted removal suite, Get Lost should be high on the list of cards to consider overall because of just how raw efficient it is.
Yeah, when I saw this in the LCI preview, I was like, man, that card is like insanely efficient, and is like good enough to break into like CEDH, because it's absurdly mana efficient. And most of the time, I feel like outside of Standard, when I would use this card is when I am proactively removing your threat to win next turn.
Yep.
Stop something like that. I think this card has a lot of potential to become a like Commander staple.
Yeah.
More than it already has. The card is just, the longevity on it's insane.
Yeah, it's just like I said, it's a really clean answer. Map tokens aren't entirely the most threatening thing compared to a 3/3. They don't immediately create a threat. They can become a threat after a creature hits the board, but they're just kind of passable.
Yeah.
As far as timeline on this is concerned, this sells, or when I was taking my notes, was selling over 20 copies a day, and there was no anchor for this card. They were like infinite at $4 with $1.50 shipping, so the market price of $3.50 is a bit of a lie. Again, it's mainly like a $5 card. There are close to 300 copies that need to sell through before this does become a $6 card prior to shipping. So we're looking at about 2 months to turn these around for profit into TCG Player if we were to buy in today. Vendor buy lists were lagging when I was taking my notes, so I wouldn't expect them to really move these for to be able to move these to vendors for over 3 months unless there's a sudden rush on them, most likely because of something in Standard. But if velocity does pick up, I would hedge a guess that it is, again, because of Constructed, not Commander. Because right now that's kind of, I don't want to say that's like the focus because we're at the tail end of Modern season, and then I think we move into Pioneer season. But with this continued, like, I'll put the word effort here in quotes to make Standard playable at the LGS for an FNM format, this is a card that people need to play if they want to play the control deck.
Yeah.
Reprint equity on this card, map tokens and Explore are both tied to Ixalan. I did my research here. Could I see them breaking out into a random Commander deck? Sure, but they haven't yet. Similarly, I can see these breaking out into a random Horizon set, but I wouldn't bet on it as we didn't see Explore break out of the original Ixalan set at all.
No.
So I would imagine this is all kind of self-contained there. So reprint equity on this is close to 0. Buy quantity on these, I have about 6 of these from opening product, and I'd be happy to pick up another 6 to 10 over time as they appear at my LGS. Like, I knew this card was good. We opened a couple, and I just finished out my playset, and then went a little above and beyond because I wanted copies of this card for play. Like, not as a speculative look, when it basically just hung around $3.50 like it is now before Murders of Karlov Manor. I just moved in on about, like I said, 6 of them, and I'm happy to have them.
Yeah.
What you got?
Not bad. I have an interesting one. Now, this is one that I actually picked last year, I believe, and that is Reign of Riches. Now, I am specifically going for the Streets of New Capenna version, which I bought one of the bricks that was there when I picked that card at $5 each. It is now down to less than that. So it is an enchantment, red 3. When it enters the battlefield, create 2 treasure tokens. The first spell you cast each turn from mana that a treasure was spent to cast has Cascade. Why am I picking this card now when it has dropped more? Well, that is because there's been kind of a trend with some reprints recently with Wizards of the Coast. And that is that a card will come out, it will sit for a year, and then they'll reprint it twice in the same year, or 3 times, or more. We have in the last year gotten reprints of this card in Bloomburrow Commander and Outlaws of Thunder Junction Commander. So back to back, basically. Now, that has caused the price to crater, but similarly, and this is very interesting, it's still a commander card out of those sets. It is not in the base set, so it's something that they are content seemingly to just sit in the supplemental product slot. It's still something that I believe in long term, because this effect, as we can see by it being printed into new sets recently, is something that has become evergreen. We're getting treasures forever now, which more on that later with a future pick. But I think timeline-wise, that's where this gets a little tough, because you can take a look at the velocity of each of these cards, because there's 4 printings now, although one of them is from the promo pack, so let's not count that one. But if you look at Streets of New Capenna, Outlaws of Thunder Junction, and Bloomburrow, they all have wildly varying sell rates between 5 and 15 copies a week. So we're looking at a little bit longer timeline on this one. But this is something that I expect, as I did before. If it doesn't hit a meaningful reprint, and it should not for a while now that it's been reprinted, it has nowhere to go but up long term. It also has a higher incorporation rate than when it first got released, so more people are using it in decks that they're registering. I just think that things like this are kind of an opportunity now in this new world. That, hey, if you believed in it when it was $5 and you said if a reprint is not great, you probably still believe in it when it's 50 cents out of the Bloomburrow Commander product. So maybe it's time to just re-up more. So that's why I picked it. I thought it was good then. I still think it's good now, even after the reprint. It's going to take a little bit longer than it did, but if I can get in at an average of 50 cents a piece and spend like $5 to $10, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I like this again as a lesson pick.
Yeah.
Where when you took an L on it after, because we didn't think it would get hit 3 times in a year effectively.
Yeah.
And the price graph does show it trending upwards heading into OTJ after, however long it sat, and then back-to-backs, right?
Yeah.
But noticing that the trend of reprints is back-to-back or back-to-back-to-back, and then we have some time to breathe, it's important to come back and revisit stuff like this, especially for a card that started to finally, pick up, and it picked up pretty quick.
Yeah.
And, I'm going to say this, and it's not like it went astronomically high, but it did almost triple up between October 2023 and right before the reprint in, March of 2024.
Yeah.
So that's that's 5 months and almost tripled in price. So it's not like people weren't playing this. I think not tracking the incorporation rate like you mentioned on rec, it's hard to see if it really did start to ramp up there as well. So that demand becomes sated immediately, it craters back down. But once those copies are picked up and people are starting to come back around and are like, all right, I need this card, I don't have it, I've got to buy it again. Supply dwindles, demand needs to be sated, the price goes up, right?
Yep.
So I think this is another fantastic lesson for people. Okay, you might take the L on a reprint, but if you give it a little while, give it the year, see if it picks up the rest of the year, see if it picks up that second reprint, or maybe the second and the third, and then it's smooth sailing from there on out. So if you want to hold on a little longer, you've probably got a year or so to kind of make hay again. So I think as a lesson overall, this is a great pick and another good, a great pick for a lesson and another good upcycle of a card from the past.
Yeah.
So I like it. I'm here for it. Anything before we cut out?
Nope.
All right, so for at MtG Cabalcast on Twitter, Facebook, Patreon, and YouTube, I am at Halt Iron Reptar. You are?
At Damon_Thurston.
We'll see you next week.